Hey, Chicagoland real estate investors. Want to talk to you today about lease violations, and not the obvious one that we all know about of a tenant didn't pay rent and they violated a lease, but we'll dig into some deeper examples of things you might come across and really how you have to be thinking about these issues when you're addressing them with your residents. So I'm Mark 𝗟𝗍𝗄, partner, founder, GC Realty Development, also co-host of Chicago's #1 real estate investing podcast, Straight Up Chicago Investor. Check that out. We record every single week. Tons of huge value. If you found value in this video here, you'll find tons of that in just one episode. So talking about lease violations. Now, like I said in the beginning of this video, we're not talking about late rent and we're not talking about evicting based on that. But what we're talking about more of is violations that are going to come up during the tenancy of, maybe they have an unauthorized pet. What do? You showed up and there's a dog there and they tell you that it's a babysitter. They're babysitting that dog. That's one example. Pet poop in the yard. They continuously, you allowed the pet, but they're not picking up their pet poop and the neighbor's complaining, or maybe you're attracting rats or whatever it might be. So, issues with the neighbor, that's one I get calls on all the time as well too, and we talk about that briefly. But all these things have different steps that you could take. Now, ultimately, you could give a 10-day notice cure for any of these, and this doesn't matter anywhere you're in the state. Give a 10-day notice of the lease, part of the lease that they're violating or they're breaking, and they have 10 days to correct that. If they don't, you can evict them off of that notice. I've never seen anyone do this in 23 years, evict off of a 10-day notice. So it's super rare, and I would not depend on that. And I think really what has to happen is the way you reply, the way you respond, the expectations you set is going to be so crucial, because you really can't depend on allowing the law to fix this for you, because you're really on your own in this. Especially a 10-day notice is pretty worthless. Now, you can serve a 10-day notice. Where I think 10-day notices do serve a purpose is when you, more of a scare tactic, like, hey, I will potentially do this, because not all tenants are like, screw you, I know you can't evict me off that. And so there is some level of threat to that. So keep that in mind. So when your tenant calls you up and you come out for a work order, and you go in there and maybe the place is crazy dirty and it's very clear that, I walked into a house one time and there's literally, no one was home. And there's a bunch of hamburger, McDonald's, just burgers sitting there on the table, on the kitchen, like just food laying everywhere. Now, I was coincidentally there because the neighbor downstairs was reporting a whole bunch more mice and bugs and ants in that season, more so than traditional. And I was walking through the other units, and that's what I saw. So I had to give them I gave him a 10-day notice to cure, and I basically came back and inspected that it was clean. Now, I also had real conversation with the tenant, like, hey, listen, I don't care what you do, but it's affecting the building, and that is affecting the other tenants, and that's affecting the complaints that are coming to me. That's affecting, they potentially are going to call the city, and all these things. There ends up being this downstream effect of issues that I try to be real with the tenant of, like, hey, just please put your garbage in a closed can and close it up. So, that's one example there where I used a 10-day notice. I knew I couldn't evict on it, but I wanted to just let her know I was serious. So I had a conversation with that tenant in the past. So another one is picking up poop. You might allow pets and then they try telling you that it's not my poop and this and that. So really, sometimes you have to take all the tenants in the building and basically saying that, hey, giving a violation to everyone, and maybe talk to the tenancy who it wasn't, and then you kind of push it onto the tenant that it was, to really be responsible to own it. And I know a bunch of owners that have set up cameras in the past to catch the people leaving the poop in the yard. So, or some people have pets and they've changed the rule where they couldn't do anything. They're like, hey, listen, we're just not going to allow pets in the yard anymore, and you're going to have to walk them in the front, and then everybody in the building loses. So handling these different lease violations it's just different case-by-case scenario, tenant-by-tenant scenario. Some tenants are super receptive, some tenants are super combative, and you as the investor, as the entrepreneur here, has to understand where you can push and where you have to kind of stand back. So unauthorized pets, that's another big one. You go there and you tell them that, hey, you're not allowed to have that pet here, and they're like, oh no, I'm babysitting for my sister who's in New York. You should have something in your lease that pets are not allowed in the property no matter what, even for babysitting. So maybe that's something you should review your lease on. But you definitely want to give them in that situation of the pets, even if they're claiming it, they're the sitter. If you don't believe them, then you simply got to give them a 10-day notice. That way they know you are freaking serious. So that's always important as well too. So issues with neighbors. Now, this is a sticky one. I had a buddy of mine call me up recently. he's got two neighbors going at it. And I think there's some sort of, there's some relations there, someone cheating on somebody with the neighbor, so kind of crazy drama going on there. And there's only so much you can do there. And he called the police on him. He encouraged because both tenants were coming to him and complaining. So he encouraged tenant A, hey, call the police. This is kind of a domestic dispute. And he's telling tenant B, call the police. You got to handle this. They threw your stuff in the garbage. That's destruction of property. That's your property. You have the right to call the police. He feels threatened. You have the right to report him. And I believe that one of them even got a restraining order on the other one. He put it all in the police hands. Now, ultimately, he was nervous about, one of the tenants had to go, and both their lease renewals were coming up this year. So he was super nervous, and this is an important part of this video, is the Tenant Retaliation Act. It's something that's been around since the 60s, but they redid it in 2025 and stronger and helps tenants even more so. So if an owner goes and does something, a tenant can claim it's retaliation. So all these things that we're talking about here today, it's super important to make sure you're documenting this. If you have a conversation in person, follow up with the email with the tenant saying, hey, per our conversation we had outside the building, I just want to remind you that you have to do this, this, and this. Make sure everything's documented, because a tenant can come back. You say, hey, listen, I'm not going to renew your lease. And they come back and say, oh, you're retaliating me because I came to you and complained about this, or you're retaliating because of this or that. And it might be race even. You're retaliating me because the color of my skin. So you don't want that. Now, you can't get in trouble for retaliation against something they did wrong, or what we're talking about today, lease violations. So these lease violations, document them, have them in order, are super important. That way they can never come back with tenant retaliation. Now, in that situation with the domestic dispute, or the two neighbors that might have had domestic relations, he was advised to basically just give them both the option, like, hey, you guys can both break your lease if you want to leave. And versus getting down the road. He just needed one of them to leave. And both parties were being stubborn, neither one wanted to leave. So he even offered one of them a little incentive, moving costs, to move. That being said, he ultimately ended up giving them both. Both of them were wrong, right? They're very childish, but he gave them both non-renewals. But he documented everything along the way. Even when he found out that tenant A called police on tenant B, he got that police report. That way, you get that. You can request that freedom of information. You could get that if you're the owner of the building. So, but he had all those ducks in a row because he wanted to make sure that no one could come back and say, hey, you retaliated against me. When in all reality, he was just trying to maneuver around these crazy things that the tenants were doing. So all these things today, again, nothing about rent, but tenants can violate lease in so many different ways, and how you handle it is ultimately how you handle it, how swiftly you handle it, and how fair you handle it is ultimately what's going to either keep your sanity or keep you out of trouble. So if you ever have an issue, please reach out to me. Happy to always help walk you through or advise you what I would do. If you don't want to go at this alone, if you don't want to deal with this, if any of these stories scared you, we offer property management service for anyone in the city or suburbs. So love to hear from you, and we'll talk to you soon.